So, first of all, thank you so much for receiving me here for the
our first guest.
Yes.
Yes, since moving in.
Ah, yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you so much. You made a model based on a model agency. I mean, you created a model agency.
Yeah.
I believe this is a really good idea.
Yeah.
So how come you came up with that?
So it all started out with Shudu a few years ago, and Shudu was my first character that I created, and she became very, very popular. At the time, I had no idea, you know, when I was creating her, I had no idea that she was going to become so popular, but she did. And after that, I was just so inspired to keep creating these characters, and I wanted to kind of a way of hosting it that felt kind of natural and organic. And I think a modeling agency is the perfect way to display these characters and showcase them. So me and Tom, who works alongside me, decided one night that we wanted to create this agency, and in one night we created the website and everything. So it was quite crazy.
Yeah, because you were a photographer back in London.
The transition from fashion photography to 3D was really tough because I had a good career in fashion photography, and I always felt guilty that my heart wasn't really in it, you know, because a lot of people would give so much to have a career like that, you know, but for me, my heart was never really in it. So I felt very guilty leaving it behind, but when I saw how successful my work was in 3D, and how happy that it made me, and how many comments and, you know, all of that, there was no real reason to stick with photography. I think in the future I'll go back and do some do more photography, once I've kind of found my kind of voice with photography, but I kind of had felt like I had lost it, you know, and now I feel like my voice is very much in 3D.
Okay, so how do you define your models? Are they real? Do they exist? How do you say like because they exist? They have personality. How will you explain that to people that they see they are not in real life, but they are someone actually? So how will you explain that?
So to me, they are kind of characters, but they're kind of slightly more than that. Especially Shudu, you know, she's kind of taken on a life of her own, you know. And when I created her, I had no idea of where she would go, and she's kind of almost taken me on this journey herself. You know, it's strange. You know, they don't exist, but they also have this impact. You know, a real impact that a human being would have. So although they're only 3D characters, you know, you start to form kind of relationships with them, and you start to kind of really enjoy their character and feel like they're almost a real person. So although unfortunately they're not real, I'm sure that they do exist in some way. You know, the impact that they have shows that they really do exist.
Yeah, in fact, Shudu has like how many followers on Instagram?
Nearly 200,000 now.
Yeah, nearly.
Yeah.
I saw the other
Very
day.
close.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah, that's amazing. Honestly, Shudu looks so real. So when I saw her the first time, I think I saw her on, what is the magazine? Well, right now I don't remember. It's a London-based magazine, and I remember I didn't realize she was a digital model.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, I thought she was real.
Wow.
You are not worried to show imperfections in the models, whereas some photographers want to hide them. They are trying to make them. Are you trying to make them more human, where some photographers trying to do the opposite? What do you think about that?
I think when it comes to skin and kind of imperfections and things like that, I think sometimes you can make an image and make it look very polished, and sometimes you can show much more of the imperfections. And I think it's important to have a balance of both. I think photographers that kind of always want to hide that and kind of deny that these kind of imperfections exist, yeah, it's dehumanizing, you know. So when it comes to 3D models, you almost have to add these imperfections to kind of make them human. You know, you have to you give them these kind of subtle fine lines and pores and things like that to make them relatable and to make them feel like they're real. When it came to Bren, our kind of curve model, she has stretch marks on her stomach, and a lot of people related to that. You know, when I first showcased her, a lot of people were really happy about that inclusion, and they started to come up with their own stories about you know, who she was, why she had these stretch marks and things like that. So it goes to show just how important these things are and how much other people relate to them.
Yeah, I realized I saw that, and also like Dagny, the hands, like when we put the hands down, you can see the veins and everything. And as a photographer, I tend to avoid that. And I saw the photos, and I was like, the hands look so real. And hands are so difficult to draw. So I imagine to do in digital must be this is a masterpiece. What would you say to convince a client to use a digital model over a real one?
So I never try to convince anyone. I feel like when the clients approach me, they already have an idea of why they want to use a digital model. There are some cases where I think digital models would actually have a really great impact, and that's things like child photography. You know, when you think of children's fashions and things like that, it's a very, very hard working industry, and I feel that 3D models could have a really positive impact there, because children don't have to work such long hours and things like that. And obviously fashion is maybe not the best industry to kind of bring kids into. You know, it's a very adult industry. So there are some cases where I would maybe try to convince people to use maybe a 3D model over a real one, but yeah, otherwise I let the clients decide for themselves.
And also, well, I would like to know more about the benefits of getting the digital models, like price. Eventually is going to be cheaper, I guess.
So currently digital models are even more expensive than real models. You know, they take a lot more time to create, and you know, it's not, there aren't that many advantages as you would think. But what we're doing was we're future proofing. You know, we're predicting for a future where most people will be designing in 3D. There will be a lot more kind of interaction with 3D from consumer side. So we're kind of looking to the future, and we're looking at about 3 to 5 years before 3D becomes a massive thing within fashion. Right now, there's a revolution starting within fashion when it comes to 3D. And there's so many benefits to that. You know, you have sustainability and kind of increased speed with kind of productions and things like that. So there's a lot of benefits to 3D, and if you're making all these garments in 3D, obviously you want to showcase them on 3D people. You know, it just makes sense. It's much more kind of organic. So that's what we're kind of predicting for. Right now, the benefits of 3D models is more to do with showcasing that you're an innovative company, you know, showcasing, wow, this is what we can achieve, and it's just around the corner. You know, it's more from a branding perspective, a marketing perspective. I have done some experiments with some big brands that are kind of looking at creating a whole 3D pipeline, and we're not quite there just yet, but we will be very, very, very soon, and that's when things start to get very exciting.
Yeah, I think it's a very disruptive turn that is going to happen. Yeah, and right now it's slow, but it's going to be very, I can't predict that. Yeah, it's with all the industry, with the technology, it's going to be faster and faster. So yeah. Let's talk a little bit about controversy. I see some people on Instagram ask things like, why take places that other beautiful women could have had and replace it with the Shudu? What would you answer to that?
I think the modeling industry is changing, and it's a very unsustainable industry anyway. It's been scaled up so large that, you know, you have models that are working crazy amount of hours. They're doing jobs that are just very, very, very intense for such little money now. You know, it's not the industry that it once was, and it's definitely not the glamorous industry people think it is. There is a lot of pressure on women, you know. How can you tell a human being, oh, your waist needs to be this big or your thigh needs to be this big? I don't think that's an industry that's really great for real people. You know, I think using 3D models can actually be beneficial, you know, because you can make them however you want to make them, you know, so it kind of removes that pressure from real models. I also think that the consumer will always want real models as well as digital models. I don't think they're ever going to fully replace real people.
You think no?
No, I think the consumer will always want some real models, you know, and a human kind of touch on certain things. But I do think that they will have a huge impact in the future. I think people also have to look at this from a sustainability point of view as well, and how fashion shoots can be extremely wasteful. You know, a model can shoot for e-commerce 200 to 300 garments a day. Those garments are cut off the model and they're sent to landfill or burnt. And this is happening every single day, thousands and thousands and thousands of garments. So we need to change this. And if that means, unfortunately, that we use digital models instead of real models in some cases, it's better for the environment that way. But my and the company personal mission is not to replace anybody. We actually, when we get paid promotions, we actively seek to work with real people, real models, whether we're using them for motion capture or as stand-ins. We really, really like to include real people as well. So it's hard to showcase that because the final result, you know, you generally can't see the real models, but we're trying much harder to make sure people are aware that we do work alongside real people as well.
I think people have to understand this process. Like, we tend to use filters, Instagram filters to make us less personal, but the other way around, they don't understand.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I don't remember. This question is a little bit like like a friend of mine told me that he read about, like, you have stated that one of your intention is about exclusivity, and you try to promote inclusivity by showing Black plus size digital models.
Yeah.
He said that I didn't find any evidence online, so I just wanted to ask you. I don't know if you do, but could you tell me, please, why would you do that in digital models? That was a question.
So I think diversity and representation is extremely important in the 3D space, because the 3D space is a fashion tech space. And although we're starting to make really, really great headway in fashion when it comes to diversity and inclusion, the tech space is so behind. You know, if you look at any kind of tech convention or anything, it's very much marketed, very much about kind of white men or Asian men. You know, so to see a woman of color or at the very forefront of this technology space, even if she's just a 3D representation, I think is a very powerful thing. You know, I think it makes people feel like, wow, you know, I'm actually a part of that. And a lot of the time we don't see enough of that within technology. We definitely don't see enough of dark-skinned women within gaming and things like that. So although fashion is really great and it's doing really, really well with representation, we really need to see the same progress when it comes to technology.
Great. Let's talk about your models. How did you create Shudu and Dagny? Like, Shudu was the first one.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration?
So when I created Shudu, I really didn't know what I was kind of creating. I was just creating a beautiful woman, and I had this image in my mind of these gold necklaces, you know, and this kind of deep dark complexion, and just an undeniably beautiful woman, you know, something that everyone would look at and go, wow, you know, she's gorgeous.
She is.
So when I created that first image and I sent it out, it went viral, and this was the first time my work has ever had that kind of attention. And people loved it. People really, really, really liked that picture, and I kind of developed a character from her. When it came to Danny, it was much more. It was kind of about, can I do that again? You know, can I create a character that's so realistic again, but totally different from Shudu? You know, was I just very lucky when it came to creating Shudu, or can I, you know, do I have a talent for creating realistic characters? It was kind of a challenge. So when I created Danny, my kind of goal was to create the most realistic looking character that I could, with a fair complexion, who was inspired by actresses that I enjoyed growing up, you know. So you've got Jodie Foster and Michelle Pfeiffer and Sigourney Weaver and Julianne Moore, Sissy Spacek. They were all inspirations for Danny's character, and when you see them next to her, you can kind of start to see all of the references.
I can relate Michelle Pfeiffer,
Mhm.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer is a big inspiration for kind of like her bone structure and things like that. And then actresses like Julianne Moore and Sissy Spacek are very much about more like the coloring and skin tone. So you can kind of start to see those references, and I try to keep my work very personal, you know, so they were women that I looked up to growing up, you know, in movies, and I wanted to kind of have those references in there.
So tell me more about their personality, how you create that personality.
Mm-hmm. So personality, so I kind of almost let the characters create their own personalities. I very much focus on imagery.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of personalities can just come through imagery. You know, a certain stance, a certain look. You kind of get a feel for a character, you know, a feel for who they are. You don't need to write very long paragraphs, or, you know, you don't need to tell a whole story to showcase who someone is. And I think Shudu's personality comes through very, very, very strongly when you just look at her pictures. You can tell she's extremely confident, you know, you can tell that she's a nice person because she just has this kind of welcoming energy. But I haven't said much about that, you know, I haven't written anything really about their personalities, but they just seem to come through the images, and that's something that I really, really love.
I think it was for Harper's Bazaar
Mm-hmm.
interview
Mm-hmm.
that she said.
Yeah.
Things.
So we have done a couple of interviews. With that, we work alongside Amma Badu, who's a writer, and she does the interviews as Shudu. And it just, when it comes to Shudu, I didn't want to have too much input on her kind of personality, because I think it really needs the touch of someone who has a similar background to Shudu. It really needs that authentic touch, you know. Me as a guy, I'm you know, I might write her character slightly differently, but Amma Badu as a woman, specifically a black woman who has a similar background to Shudu, she can put a much more authentic spin to that character, which I think is very important.
I saw on Instagram that you created the Global News program. I don't know what is that, so can you tell me?
So that's something that we're focused on creating this year, and it's a network of models throughout the world that look similar to our models, so that when we want to create content for our models, we can actually work alongside them, and we can work with people all around the world. We don't actually have to go and take pictures of them ourselves. We can arrange photo shoots in anywhere, and an example of this was we found a model in Nigeria, so we set up a shoot with a photographer, and he took the pictures, and then we retouched them and worked on them in-house. So we don't need to go anywhere, the model doesn't need to travel, we can work with kind of anyone, anywhere, and it's a way of kind of bringing opportunities to people rather than making them travel to come to opportunities, because there are many, many, many beautiful and talented people in the world, but unfortunately some of them aren't able to travel. You know, they're not able to come to London or New York or wherever. You know, sometimes they're in kind of small, hard to get to places, and I instead want to use 3D to be able to bring the opportunity to them rather than you know, making them kind of have to travel.
So it's totally the opposite that some people think.
Yeah, yeah. It's Unfortunately, some people have the wrong idea that we're trying to take anything away, but really we want to bring opportunity to people. And that's something I've always wanted to do, even as a photographer. I traveled a lot as a photographer, and I spent some time in Trinidad and Tobago scouting models and taking pictures of them. And that's where I realized in Trinidad and Tobago, I met these incredible models, so beautiful. But unfortunately for them, it's a very, very small industry in Trinidad. And if they wanted to become successful models, they would have to leave their families behind, their friends behind, and move to New York. It's very risky. They may not even make it as models there. And that's a huge risk, you know. And then a lot of these models, they would get pregnant and start a family, and then they can't leave after that. So it made me realize that we need to kind of bring opportunity to people rather than making them travel. But there's so many people out there who could be incredibly successful, but unfortunately their circumstance means they can't. So we need to do an outreach to these people.
It's amazing. I didn't imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great surprise. Yeah, this is an amazing program. Okay, so now let's talk about the image making process. So how long does it take? What kind of technology you use?
So there are several ways that we create imagery. Probably the one that most people are interested in is fully 3D imagery. So everything you see in that image is three-dimensional, from the dress to the model to the background. Obviously we started off by creating the models, which is what we have already. Depending on the client, we may have to make the dresses into 3D. And then we kind of decide on a pose and lighting and location, and it's very much like a normal photo shoot, except you're doing it all on the computer. You know, it almost feels like a game or something. It's, you know, you're kind of putting all the pieces together and posing them, and then you render things out, and then you start to see whether or not it's realistic. So that process can take a while, but it's getting a lot quicker. You know, the more we're kind of used to it, the faster our pipeline becomes. So it can take anywhere from a week or two to start to produce kind of imagery. For example, the S Moda interview that you saw, article, I think that took us about 10 days, I think, to put everything together. So it was very, very fast.
Yeah.
Because once we have the scene set up and the lighting and everything, all we're really doing is swapping out the dresses and changing the poses. So it becomes kind of quicker and quicker. So that's a fully 3D image. If you're looking at something, sometimes we also do mixed reality. So that means sometimes our clients, the dress that they have or something is way too complicated to make in 3D. So we have to shoot the dress in real life on a real model, and then put Shudu or another model on top of that. So that process is the same as a traditional photo shoot, and then there's some post-production afterwards. So again, that can take a week or two. So it's a time-consuming process, but it's not as long as maybe some people think.
And also for video?
Video is something we have a hard time tackling, because animation, when it comes to 3D, is so time-consuming. So at the moment, we're looking at different ways of tracking faces. You know, we're doing it more of a mixed kind of reality sort of way, and also deep fake. So to look at machine learning and kind of using AI technology to replace the face of
so like
model.
the cinema.
Yeah. So very, very kind of complex technology when
Yeah.
it comes more to animation. And also, as I have a photography background, my strength is more in still imagery rather than animation. So I'm a bit kind of scared to tackle animation at the moment. But we've done some experiments and they've come out very, very well.
Yeah, that's why I was asking. For the S Moda magazine, what roles of people were involved in that process? Because I see that there was an art director and a stylist, you, and I don't remember more like so it depends on the photo shoot. There are different roles, but I want to understand what people are they, what are their roles.
So part of the roles, a few of the roles were very traditional, you know, very much like the fashion editor, stylist, you know. The stylist had to pull the clothes, photograph them for reference for us, and then we used those photographs and we passed them to a 3D fashion designer who used those photos to recreate 3D versions of those garments.
So they photographed the clothes before in Spain, for example. Or
Yeah,
before?
but just on a hanger.
Okay,
So not
okay.
on a not on a
Okay.
model.
Yeah.
So they would just take reference photos so we could see the texture of the fabrics and things like that. Some of the reference photos were just off the catwalk, so we didn't have any very close-up imagery. And we sent that to the 3D fashion designer who recreated these outfits in 3D, and it was very challenging because we only have like one angle of the dress or something, so you have to kind of imagine how it was constructed. So a really big challenge. And then once that 3D fashion designer is finished, they send the files over to me, and I kind of start to texture them and kind of make sure that they start to look realistic and put them on the model. I also work alongside Tom, who works for me, and he helps to set up the scenes and kind of pose the models, make sure that they're in the right poses and things like that. So there's a team, me and Tom kind of work on it this side. We have a 3D fashion designer who makes the outfits. We have the stylist who selects the outfits, and the art director who tells us what kind of lighting, how the scene should be, you know, how the general mood of the shoot should be. So it was a big project, but I think very successful in the short amount of time we had to do it.
It was, yeah. I remember I went to Spain for Christmas, right before Christmas, and I saw the magazine and I was like, I want to buy that. I need to read that. So yeah, and it was the right moment because it was starting the new decade. So it's like the new era.
When we were still hopeful about 2020, when we still had hope.
Yeah, oh well, yes. Yeah, because I printed it here. The article is Juan Carlos,
He's the 3D fashion designer.
Yeah, that was what I was like. I thought he was in your team, so I was like, and he was.
We worked together quite a few times, but he's freelance. So he's a 3D fashion designer, and there's many people who are becoming 3D fashion designers. So what he does is he creates garments in 3D. And this is becoming much more of an important job, and we work alongside them regularly. So he
creates this.
Yeah, so using an image, he created the dress. I take that dress, I put it on Danny and pose her, and then I kind of work alongside him to texture the dress, make sure that it looks kind of perfect and right. So yeah.
Amazing. If you have anything you want to promote or to talk about any kind of project or something that people want to know and I want to know.
I think we touched on the global kind of muse program and how important that was to me, and just, you know, how I came to think of it, you know, many years ago when I was sitting on a beach in Trinidad. And I you know, I think that's really important. We touched on sustainability and how this could really impact that, you know. And we've also touched on the pressure the kind of modeling industry has, and maybe this is not necessarily a bad thing to kind of alleviate some of the kind of pressure on women in the fashion industry. So yeah, I think we've spoken about a lot of things.
Yeah.